Hey everyone, it's Jim
And Charles
from Valves and More, an online vintage tube store. And today in Tube Lab number 250, we're going to talk a bit about how to be objective. That's our neighbor downstairs, Erwin, having a chat with probably our neighbor next door, Baloo. So if you hear two different barks,
well, hopefully it's not getting too annoying.
yeah, he usually just says hello. Anyways, so how to be objective when reviewing audio gear. But first, caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Well, last week we got an angry comment about our recent burn-in episodes. The gist was he claimed that we are just applying a subjective opinion to our assessment and calling that the truth. Now, what he's saying is partly true and substantially not. From his point of view, only bench testing results should be used to assess audio performance. And this was very much the audio world I grew up in the 1970s. Today, anyone who really designs audio gear uses every tool available to assess audio performance. And that includes critical listening. In fact, when we bring a new design to life, we spend more time critically listening than we do testing it on the lab bench. Yes, both are important. But no matter how good a piece of audio gear tests, if it doesn't sound great, who cares?
And just something to add to this too, there's a lot of what Dad would call flim-flammery out there in terms of how things are tested and what testing information is shared for it. So just because you see something like a flat frequency response, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually performing as well as it should, and it'll perform that well in your system.
So what's the favorite trick of manufacturers and reviewers with frequency response charts?
Well, just not to show them.
Yeah.
But if they do show them, they usually change the scaling on them so that everything looks very flat.
Yeah, and this is one of the things when we first started commercially producing audio kits, I said we're going to include complete and honest specifications, including complete schematics, and the scaling on things like sweeps, frequency sweeps, needs to be discernible so that you can actually look at it and see the dips and the dives, because there is really essentially no such thing as a perfectly flat frequency response, no matter how good the gear is. Mm-hmm. But there are better designed and better built pieces of gear in which it's relatively flat.
And, sometimes you don't want it to be perfectly flat. It all depends on the kind of gear you're running, what kind of sound you like, how, in our case, the tubes are affecting things a little bit. All of it matters, and a flat frequency response does not necessarily make for the best sound, and it might not even be flat in the first place.
Yeah. But in general, good specifications, along with a good critical listening experience, sort of gets you in the direction you're heading right off the bat.
You need a combination of them.
That's right. Now, okay, so how do we take what is clearly a subjective opinion and make it more of an objective opinion? Or to put it another way, how do we remove our biases and make our critical listening more akin to our bench testing methodology? 3 question marks. Well, it's relatively easy. You take careful listening notes, make sure to use the same test tracks, same volume, and only change one thing at a time. And to help us with that, I've updated what originally was a tube assessment sheet, and which I used years ago to start talking about how different tubes sounded compared to each other. And I've simply updated it, and this is sort of a real life assessment sheet of what what was prototype number 1 of our new solid-state monoblock. Now, I only built one channel. We just wanted to get a first listen.
And it's definitely not the final version of it. We already have a second one in the works.
Well, the second one's built.
Yeah.
And test.
But we haven't been able to listen to it yet. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that over on the other channel someday soon. Okay, so I only put in a few test tracks. As we get deeper into critical listening, we'll use more and more test tracks, and we'll bring in a lot more of these. Now, I always like to start with anything, with a tube or with a preamp or a power amp. I always like to start with what's the noise floor like, right off the bat. And in this case, we had noise, and it was medium plus. I made some notes about it, and basically it's an open chassis build because it's the first prototype, so there is literally no chassis.
So that means no shielding, suboptimal wiring placement, all sorts of stuff.
So we're probably picking up some EMI. That's air, electronic air, noise in the air. But I also made a note saying to Charles, maybe we should simulate the power supply and take a look at that. Bass was excellent, plus. We don't get, you'll never see me putting 3 pluses. And yeah, just amazing. And that was very promising. I like to start with the bass because that sort of underlines all of the music that you're listening to, and it's easy to sort of overlook it. Even though the mid-range is absolutely critical, bass is important, treble is important, but I start with the bottom and I work my way up the frequency band, basically. You can do it any way you want. Yeah, but the mid-range was just good minus.
That means it was okay, acceptable. Is a good way of looking at it.
I wrote meh and very flat. That's a death sentence to design. Treble was bad. So it was very detailed, but it was harsh and it was edgy. And and we couldn't even listen to it. It was that bad.
Yeah.
Stereo image and soundstage, these are really important, but I only built one channel, so it's not applicable. Let's move down a little bit so you can see the rest of it. Now, conclusions often really, really important. So details as to why the noise or microphonics, bass, mid-range, treble, why you thought it was bad or why you thought it was good minus or excellent plus, these are really important notes. But the overall conclusion, that sort of summarizes what you're thinking. And I wrote promising with an exclamation mark because it was promising, even though it's deeply flawed. We don't expect prototype number 1s to be perfect. And if you're auditioning, let's say 2 or 3 phono preamps, one you've bought, one that you owned for years, and one you borrowed from a friend, don't go into the listening experience with any expectations. Just do your thing with your notes and pile up all your notes, and then sit down without any music on and think about what your conclusion's going to be. Do that right away.
While it's still fresh.
And then take a break, go for a walk, do some laundry, and then put the next piece of gear into system and start with a fresh page. Put this away. You do not want to be looking at this. And then do the whole process over again. Volume matching is absolutely critical when you're comparing pieces of gear. So start off right away with not critically listening, but critically setting the volume until you think you're about right. And the reason why volume is so important is because our brains perceive a louder volume as a superior or better volume, or better sound. It's just a quirk of how our brains work.
And it can also reveal more detail that's very low and difficult to hear.
Yeah, and if you do any critical listening at all, you'll know the very first thing you do is you set the volume until you have it at a nice, comfortable level. So, yeah, it was promising. I've got some ideas that I wrote down, and I made a note. This could be a great amp, but we got to fix a whole bunch of things. Now, this is an example of notes of a critical listening session of a prototype build. Now, if we were doing a tube review, it would be almost exactly the same. And of course, the heading would change, and maybe the selection of tracks would. We would just go through and we'd do the same process over again. Now, you might have some preferred routines to do, and absolutely, you do it that way. But the important thing is when you're doing critical listening of a tube, of a music track, of gear, speakers, cables, it doesn't matter. Or if you're even doing a little test to see if burn-in is real in your gear. I was just listening to a YouTube from a great guy, and he was saying that his speakers, he was a speaker manufacturer, and he was saying his speakers need about 500 hours of burn-in to get to, like about 99.9%. He said they still improve to about 1,000 hours, but that first 500 hours is really the significant change. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. So he actually quantified how long it takes. Now, I'd be willing to bet that by the time he's got 100 hours on them, they're well on the way to being burned in. But that's a professional, somebody who designs and manufactures speakers, talking about how important burn-in is for his particular speaker. And if you're doing that out of curiosity for tubes or for audio gear, or even cables for that matter, make sure that you date and time your initial review, and that you actually decide to do a review at a good schedule. So figure out how many hours you would put on that gear, let's say in a week, and you'd say, okay, well, that's about 20 hours in a week or 2 weeks, and I'm going to do a second review. And don't read your original review. That sets up a biases. And what you don't want is to I think the word is actually prejudice. So you're actually setting yourself up to create a bias that wouldn't have been there if all you had was a week-old memory. Just wipe the slate clean. It's really important that you recognize little tricks that you can do to actually either corrupt what would be a very good, objective review, or turn it into something that's really a manufactured review, something that you're trying to do. What you're trying to do
is confirming your bias already.
Yeah. So what you want to do is just start from a clean slate. Don't look back at what you originally did in your first review, and create a new review and a new summary, new conclusion, and then sit down and compare the two. And you might be really surprised. So this will go into our build file, and I'll keep it as a reference, point of reference. And it'll be really interesting because I'll do one on the prototype build number 2, which, as Charles mentioned, is actually behind me. It's on a big chunk of plywood, and it's getting bigger by the day. And as soon as we build a driving preamp for it, we're going to sit down and we'll do a new sheet, and we'll see if, in fact, some of our suspicions. One of my main suspicions is we've got too many solid-state devices that the signal is running through, and maybe more tubes is what we need. So, but we don't know, but we'll find out, and we'll report back to you. Now, maybe now we've put these into the download information section, not this particular one, the blank document. So I'm going to put a link below the video. And in the past, when I've done these sheets, this is version 3 of this particular sheet. People have asked, well, can you do a version without the music selection so I can put my own stuff in? Well, we've done that this time right off the bat. So there's 2 downloads, one with some of our standard selection. I mean, we own literally thousands of albums that I would consider to be suitable for critical listening. So Yeah, so we have a huge music library depending on what we're trying to look for in an actual test situation.
But you're going to have your own, so you can get the blank sheet and fill in whatever you like on there.
Yeah, and the more you do this, the more you listen to standard tracks, and our standard tracks evolve constantly over time. So some of them stay with us for a long, long time, like Ava Cassidy's Ain't No Sunshine. It's just a really good track to capture a female vocal, and I love hearing her voice. So that has been actually a standard track for literally years. But other things have left and other things have come in. So yeah, so choose your music really carefully though. You don't want it all to be the same. You have to like your music. Well, actually, you don't have to like it.
But you should, though.
You should, though. I mean, you shouldn't be cringing while you're listening to a test track just because it's got, a good bass line that really helps you listen to the bass performance of a speaker or a tube or whatever you're up to.
Do some more searching and find something you like that has it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, not a lot has come in this week, but
we have a nice big order of tubes coming in next week that are including a lot of really beautiful rare 6SN7s.
In fact, Charles next week has planned to do a really informative and interesting 6SN shootout.
Yeah, and it's actually going to be something that you can get involved in. So I haven't worked out all the details yet, but we're going to post up some high resolution recordings. I'm going to level match them. I'm going to put up probably maybe 2 tracks for each tube, and they are going to be anonymized. So it's going to be blind, and we're going to see what people prefer, what they don't like, and maybe fill out some sheets like this for them.
Yeah, and we're going to we'll incorporate the music probably into the video like we always do, but we'll probably put below that video
some high-res captures, yeah.
Yeah, so that you're not stuck on YouTube sound. YouTube sound is not actually terrible. It doesn't totally suck, but we can do better than that. So
and we know people are typing away right now, listening to a recording over your own equipment. It's going to be very subjective, and yeah, it's going to be subjective. I'm going to try and make the cleanest recording I possibly can, and I hope you guys are going to try and listen to them over the cleanest equipment and gear that you have.
And the reason why Charles came up with this idea, of course, is that we have some really nice 6SN7s coming in, which is probably our highest demand vintage tube that we sell.
So let's see if they actually do sound as good as we think.
Now, we did get a couple of really nice tubes in just yesterday, so let's clear the decks and we'll take a look at them. Okay, Charles, so what have you got here?
Oh, well, these look like some RCA made EL34s, but wait a second.
I don't think RCA made any EL34s.
Well, they might have. Who knows? Maybe they had a small production run of something out there, but these aren't RCA made. They are Mullard XF2s. And, as per usual, we run out of these, and then we start finding some more, and they've been trickling in, and we've got a couple of beautiful new old stock ones here that just came in. And we need to get these tested and in the store. Yeah.
Now, finding new old stock, new in the box, that's NOS, NIB, XF2s is getting really, really hard. And we're finding more and more that what does come in are the dregs. So somebody tested them in a past period and essentially stuck them on the shelf and said, well,
it's not dead, but it's testing low or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So hopefully these haven't actually been tested. We normally accumulate a whole bunch of power tubes because setting up to test power tubes is a 2-man job and it's a big deal.
So we try to build up a little bit before we do it. But they look beautiful. Hopefully they haven't been selected out, and hopefully they're testing as good as we would like. But things are challenging these days whenever you're ordering tubes, especially online. There's a lot of scammers out there, a lot of junk being sold, so you have to be careful because we're getting bit constantly.
Yeah, it's quite bad. Now, luckily, we've already been able to restock a good selection of XF2 quads, And when it comes to EL34s, the Mullards are simply the best. And of course, the rebranding as RCAs, because Mullard Phillips developed the EL34, it was essentially invented out of nothing. Well, there was a heritage of power tubes prior to the EL34, but the EL34 was really the first high-powered, fairly compact, reliable, good-sounding power tube to hit the market.
And it just hit all those points.
And what ended up happening is because, of course, Philips owned Mullard, and Philips was one of the early huge multinational electronics companies. So they had patents in every marketplace, basically. So if RCA wanted to have an EL34 to sell to their customers, they had to deal with Mullard or Philips. And as a result, Mullard was happy to make XF2s for pretty much anybody, including equipment manufacturers. So you'll see a lot of them rebranded RCA. You'll see some of them even branded for Sylvania. But you'll see a lot of guitar amp manufacturers being rebranded onto the basic tube. And I would say at least half of all the XF2s that were sold out of Blackburn, UK, that's where they were pretty much all made, were rebranded. So, yeah, just a fantastic sounding EL34.
And hopefully these test good, and maybe we'll be able to make another quad out of them. We'll have to see.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you stay to the very end, here's some discount codes to help you out. Remember, we can reach pretty much everybody around the world with flat rate $20 shipping. But if your order is $150 or more after the discount, the shipping is on us, folks. And there's a secret code that I keep reminding people about that's really easy to figure out. We hand out money to a lot of people when they grab that code. And it always warms my heart, because that means you're either watching Tube Lab or you're a returning customer and you've gotten a discount card in the mail from us. This is Jim.
And Charles.
Signing off. Cheers, everyone.